Bobiverse Book 4. Heaven's River. Part 2. Bob is shocked to hear Bender's voice over the radio and starts asking questions, but their captors are not happy that they're speaking in English. Bender makes up an excuse and they try to make it seem like Bob is harmless and should just be let go. They don't buy it and decide to kill Bob. He breaks out of his chains and throws the torturer against the wall. Bob escapes the interrogation room only to find himself in a much bigger room completely filled with Quinlans. Bob uses some Jackie Chan moves and escapes. Afterwards he's able to use the radio he stole to talk to Bender and manages to learn that Bender is near Hallep's ending. Neither of them knows where that is, but it is a starting point. Bob only talks to Bender for a short time before Bender is shut off. Bob announces to the others that he has found Bender. He needs help but he's reluctant to clone. Then he learns that Huey is sending himself across the connection, which will be the help he needs. Will goes to see Professor Gilligan and learns more about the Topopolis. Most importantly, there may be a way into the administrative areas to help look for Bender. After some time has passed, Bob gets into the stream and starts to head down it, but the Quinlans have set up a net in the stream that he runs into. He barely manages to escape and decides that using the streams is a bad idea and heads overland. Eventually he makes it back to the main river and goes back into the water. Bill and will find out that in order to have gotten access to all of the auto factory, Starfleet would have had to have implemented their plan decades before. This indicates to them that Starfleet isn't working alone, since Starfleet barely existed that long ago, and it's doubtful they were that capable back then. Huey arrives in Bob's VR. Bob asks Huey what his name is, since clones generally take new names. However, Huey explains that he hasn't cloned but instead transferred. In essence, the Sparkies have figured out that as long as two copies of a Bob don't exist at the same time, the copy is the same as the original. The implication of this is that Bob 1 isn't just a copy of Robert Johansson but is in fact Robert Johansson. The war against Starfleet is progressing, especially since the humans are not taking well at all to Starfleet's actions. Bobs are starting to narrow down where in the universe their main operations are based out of. Claude and the New Home military take out a Starfleet-controlled auto factory. Claude has a suspicion that the humans will blame the Bobs for what is happening, so he gets all of his assets out of the system before they can be grabbed by the humans. As he suspects, within hours the humans try to take everything and also try to arrest him. He heads out into space away from the system. Bob is not having any luck finding Hallep's ending. Will attends an emergency meeting of the UN, and it seems that the humans don't trust any Bobs even though they know it is Starfleet that is the problem. Will decides that he should get his family out sooner rather than later. Bob manages to get into the administrative sections and to the transit. Fortunately, Hallep's ending is a stop along the route and he can take the train. Another UN Council session is going on and the humans intend to destroy all compromised auto factories and replace them with human-controlled factories. They also want to kick all Bobs off of the systems in order to secure their new equipment. Bob gets on his train, and he heads to Hallep's ending. Bob manages to find a hidden trail along the river that leads to a blank wall that is obviously the entrance to the hidden base. He manages to get in, and as he is sneaking his way in, he receives a phone call from Bill and from Huey. Once Bob is in, he hides himself and has the roamers start looking around. While they work, he returns calls to Bill and Huey. He learns from Bill that Starfleet may not have been capable of the level of sabotage that's been happening, and Huey just called to let Bob know that he had also managed to get in the administrative section from another point, though it doesn't get him anywhere. The roamers manage to find Bender and they are able to speak to each other. Bob learns a bit more of what is going on in the Topopolis, including that the administrator is an AI. This makes Bob realize that the Skippies who are trying to create an AI have a motive to be working with Starfleet. This also means that Bob doesn't know if he can trust Huey. Bob finds the train station in the rebel hideout and sets out to escape with Bender. He gets the Matrix and begins to leave but immediately runs into a Quinlan. All of the rebels are alerted, and Bob must run. Bob makes it to the train and asks for Hallep's ending, but he realizes he should have gone to Garrick's spine. However, he can't skip the stop he already asked for. From the train Bob learns that there are Quinlans waiting for him at the stop. Bob manages to get past them and out into the wilderness around Hallep's ending. Bob's next idea is to try to get to the center cylinder so that he can get on another river system. He manages to get by a guard at the door but loses most of his roamers in the process. Herschel gets a visit from Will on the Bellerophon. Will wants to work together with Herschel on the project to colonize other systems, though he suggests changes he'd like to make to the plan. Neil arrives and they go to see Herschel and Neil's secret project. It turns out to be a mani made out of millions of tiny ants. The ants being technology they took from the others. It still needs a lot of work, but it has potential. Bob makes it to the elevator, and it takes him to the central cylinder. From there he takes another elevator to one of the other rivers. When he gets there, he tries to get on a train but unfortunately, they have taken away the authorization on his stolen authorization card. Bob heads to the nearest town. One of the first things he needs to do is make sure that Bender's Matrix is safe from water and damage. He needs a waterproof box, though that turns out to be expensive. Unfortunately, it seems like the town is being watched and Bob must escape again. Bob decides to get a normal trunk rather than a waterproof box and gets a job as a deckhand on a ship. A rich entitled passenger gets on the ship as well. Bob decides to call him Snidely. They head down river, and when they reach a town, cops are waiting. They insist on searching the ship but Snidely takes issue with this. The cops agree not to search his luggage and Bob manages to separate his own luggage with Snidely so that it doesn't get searched. At the stop they pick up 2 more passengers, including an elderly Quinlan named Teresa. It turns out that she had been a history teacher at a university. This is perfect for Bob, who has been trying to learn more about the Quinlans since he came to Heaven's River in the first place. They have some interesting conversations about philosophy and engineering. Bob knows he's giving out more information than he should, but he can't help it. One night Bob is alerted that somebody is trying to get into his trunk. It is Snidely, and he is suspicious of Bob since he noticed how Bob had kept his trunk from being searched. Bill goes on a gaming campaign with the gamers, and as it turns out one of the other Bobs tries to betray the rest of the group. Bill is concerned that this is very un-Bob-like behavior, but the leader of the gamers isn't concerned at all because it makes things more fun in their group. When everyone is exactly the same, things become very boring, so as far as the gamers are concerned it's all good. When Bob arrives in another town, Snidely tries to turn him into the cops, but by this point Bob had hidden Bender's Matrix in the cargo and his trunk was full of ordinary items. The captain kicks Snidely off of the ship. That night Bob goes to put the Matrix back, but Teresa catches him. She believes that he is not from Heaven's River and isn't even a Quinlan. Bob is impressed by her intelligence and admits that he's not a Quinlan. At the next stop Bob and Teresa have to get off. When they get to the dock there are cops waiting. Teresa uses her considerable influence to stop the cops from bothering Bob. Bob decides that he needs to change things up once again and puts the Matrix in a shipping container and gets a job on another boat. After finishing work Bob talks to some of the other Quinlans and it is quite evident that Quinlans as a species are becoming less intelligent. In essence they are de-evolving. Bob speaks to the other Bobs and Bridget about the issue. They are unsure if they should get involved or not. It's the kind of thing that Starfleet is vehemently against, but none of them are comfortable with an intelligent species becoming more animalistic. Bob insists that they do nothing until Bender is safe. Back on the river Bob notices a bird that shouldn't be on the river. Later it even seems to be trying to read labels on the shipping containers. Bob suspects that it is a drone being used by the administration. He is proven right when they reach the dock, and the cops are looking for him and his crate. He had switched the contents with another crate, but unfortunately, he is arrested. The boat does not wait and heads down the river with Bender's matrix. Bob breaks out of jail that night and quickly catches up with the boat. Bob changes his face and gets back on the boat as a different Quinlan. Not long after, a bird starts looking through the shipping containers again. Likely the administrator is going to take more drastic measures in order to get a hold of Bob. Bob needs to change tactics. He abandons the boat and heads off into the wilderness to hide. Bob enters a small den but gets attacked by a badger-like creature. He kicks it and injures his leg because of it. Bob goes deep into the den and bars the way out. This leaves enough room for the badger to take up residence in the entrance. This comes in handy later when a bird drone tries to come in and investigate. After the badger destroys the bird drone, Bob gets the opportunity to look at the construction, and it has greatly superior miniaturized tech. It's not something that the Bobs need since they have surge technology, but it is interesting, nonetheless. Huey arrives and has stuff to make the shipping container Bob has completely waterproof. With this they are able to travel in the water without a boat. They float down the river for 8 days, but at some point, they must have been seen, and 4 ships try to intercept them. They decide to split up and Bob takes the crate while Huey takes the matrix. Bob intentionally leads them away in order to take attention off of Huey. Their hope is that the Quinlans will be looking for someone with a shipping container rather than just a small cube. They attach themselves to the bottom of one of the administrator's ships with the thought that they will not search their own hull. Bill is contacted by Starfleet, and they seem to think that they have one. In a way they have, because humanity no longer trusts the Bobs and it will never go back the way it was before, which was in essence the goal of Starfleet, though they threaten other more drastic actions they could take if the Bobiverse does not comply. Bob and Huey cling to the bottom of the boat until they come to the turnaround. There are blockades, so they decide the best way to get around it is to walk overland and then get back in the water. The turnaround is challenging, but they make it through. Bill and will speak about the fallout of Starfleet's war. In essence, Starfleet got what they wanted, and all of the Bobs have been excluded from human space. Worse, the humans seem to want to completely surround and blockade the path which they see as a future enemy. The Bobs of course aren't going to let that happen, but it's just another problem they have to deal with. Bob and Huey finally make it to Garrick's spine. They are very careful, but it's obvious they are being watched for. They try going in at night, and as they go through the town there is a bank of fog. Bob realizes that fog is not natural in the megastructure. This is what the administrators use to scatter people. They try to escape, but eventually they are caught. Huey takes on the whole mass so that Bob can escape. At a Bob moot, Starfleet proclaims that they have won and will relinquish all of the assets they still have and set up their own version of BobNet. They also imply that they could do more but have chosen not to. Bob runs as quickly as he can and escapes his pursuers thanks to the fact that the Resistance is fighting the administration. Huey is captured. Bob eventually makes it to the station and hopes to go through the tunnel they had dug to get in the Topopolis, but it has been found and is guarded. He decides to try and fight his way in but is captured. They take Bender's matrix and Bob has no choice but to comply. They put Bob on a separate train from the matrix, then take him to another location where he is taken into a room to be interrogated. Another radio is brought in, and this time the administrator AI called Anek interrogates Bob. Mostly it just wants to confirm that Bob's story is the same as Huey's. Then it seems like Anek is done with Bob for a while. Later Bob is released and taken to the surface where he meets Huey again. Then a giant face of a Quinlan shows up in the sky and announces that it will no longer control the Quinlan people anymore, and it is giving the Quinlans back their right to their own destiny. This obviously makes Bob suspicious of what kind of deal Huey made with Anek. Huey refuses to say anything until they have Bender's matrix safely away. They make it back to Bob's heaven vessel and Bob reactivates Bender, who is incredibly thankful to be in virtual reality again. Huey works on getting Bob's main relay station back online, and as soon as he does, the others enter Bob's VR. Bob confronts Huey about what kind of deal he made with Anek. Huey confesses that he agreed to trade the subspace and scut technology for the secret to true AI. This upsets the Bobs because Huey did this without consulting any of them. Huey argues that they have no right to stop him. The Bobs are not a governing body, and each individual Bob does what they want with the technology that they have. The Bobs aren't happy, but ultimately there's nothing they can do. The deal has been done. They head to the moot where Bender receives a very warm welcome. They also bring Anek to the moot. They discuss the finer details of the agreement Anek and Huey made before the moot officially begins. Once it does, chaos reigns as the Bobs start berating different groups for what has happened. Some of it is directed at Starfleet, while some is directed at the humans, and a big portion is directed at Huey. After some discussion, Huey manages to get the Bobs to more or less accept what he has done. After everything is said and done, the Bobiverse fractures even more as more groups splinter off. Humans have essentially decided that they will no longer be dependent on the Bobs at all and will build their own systems without the Bobs. Bob 1 thinks that it might be time to try doing what a von Neumann probe was designed to do. Bob, Bill, Will, and Garfield meet to talk about what happened. Bill brings up a suspicion that he's had for a while. He believes it is the Skippies who orchestrated the whole Starfleet war. They essentially did it because they wanted access to the AI on the Topopolis, and the only way that they were going to be able to do that was by taking the other members out of the expedition. They gave all the information Starfleet needed to take over the relay stations and auto factories simply to get Huey in a position to negotiate with the Quinlan AI. It's likely that the Skippies AI was the one that came up with the plan in the first place, but either way the Skippies were willing to go through with it. Bob visits Teresa and tells her that he can grant her wish to know more about her world.